This is an official notice of business suspension. I need your signature confirming receipt.
You remember that death certificate your father signed? It was forged. You knew that, didn't you?
The rain came down hard that night. Not the polite kind of rain that taps on. Windows the kind that means business, that turns gutters into rivers and makes the whole alley sound like static. The sign above the clinic swayed in the downpour. SARA Oriental Medicine. 4 characters. Bleeding in the rain, then sharp again. Bleeding, then sharp. Inside, the air was thick with mugwort and licorice. Root, the kind of smell that soaks into the walls after years of slow simmering. Sarah didn't put down her mortar. Not when Tae-seok shouldered through the door like he owned the place. Not when the 2 City Hall lackeys trailing behind him dripped. All over her floor, her hands kept moving. The pestle kept its rhythm against the rain. The lamp above the counter caught the edges of her hair, a full afro, dense and unrestrained, holding its shape against the steam. And the rain, like it had no interest in being anything other than what it was. Tae-seok's shoes were Italian. The soles squeaked, waterlogged and unhappy. He planted himself in the middle of the room and took stock. Cracked ceiling beams, drawer after drawer of dried herbs, packed floor to ceiling, an entire wall of glass jars, wearing handwritten labels. His eyes moved slowly. They stopped at Sarah's back. White coat, dark brown skin, a full afro the humidity hadn't touched. He stared like he was trying to figure out what didn't belong. This is an official notice of business suspension. I need your signature. Confirming receipt. Sarah set down her pestle. She turned around slowly. There was herb powder on the front of her white coat, a fine, pale dust she hadn't bothered to brush off. She looked Tae-seok over once. Top to bottom, the way you'd look at a patient whose chart you'd already read. Your complexion's yellow. Her voice was flat. Quieter than the rain, but somehow easier to hear. When did you last get your liver enzymes checked? Tae-seok's eyebrow went up. Excuse me, your right thumb? She stepped closer, setting the mortar aside. It's trembling, stress-induced. Liver dysfunction, sleep deprivation in Western medicine terms, early stage fatty liver. If you'd come to me as a patient, it'd have started with your pulse. She tilted her head slightly. You didn't come as a patient, though, did you? You the paperwork? She held out her hand. One of the City Hall guys handed it over before head fully processed what was happening. Sarah read it, line by line. Tae-seok waited. Waiting was the only option he had, and that fact was making his jaw tighten. Sarah folded the papers. You wrote foreigner in the unofficial notes field. She handed them back. Interesting choice of words. Tae-seok's jaw went rigid. That death certificate your father had authenticated. She kept her voice exactly where it was. Level, unhurried. My adoptive father signed off on it. The forged one. You've always known that, haven't you? Nobody moved. One of the City Hall guys fake coughed into his fist. Tae-seok's right thumb trembled just slightly, just once. Sarah saw it. Taeseok knew she saw it. The rain hammered the roof like it had an opinion. He left. Sarah stood at the door until the squeak of wet Italian leather faded into the rain. Then she turned around, walked back to her mortar and picked up where Shed left off. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not. Shed learned a long time ago that those two things didn't have to match, that keeping one still was enough to get through most things. The sound came from the back room. A heavy, flat thud, the kind a body makes when it drops, without warning. Sarah set down the pestle and ran. Her mother, Bong-soon, was on the floor, sitting in the wreckage of an overturned wooden chest. Everything that had been inside was scattered around. Her faded envelopes, something wrapped in traditional paper, and one heavy bundle sealed in layers of waterproof cloth. Mum. Hey, look at me. Bong-soon's eyes drifted, unfocused. Sarah had seen that look before, the beginning of an episode. She pulled her mother close and reached for the bundle at the same time. The cover had a date written on it by hand, 20 years ago. Sarah knew that year. It was the year her adoptive father had his first drink. The year he stopped laughing entirely. The rain picked up. The eaves shook with it. Sarah opened the file. The first page was dense with names. Below them, signatures. At the top, a stamp next to a signature. Oh Taeseok's father's name. Below that, her adoptive father's name. Next to it, written in red ink, 2 words. Covered up, Bong-soon's hand found Sarah's arm. It was shaking, thin enough that Sarah could feel every knuckle. I knew you'd find it. Your father said so. He said you'd be the one. Sarah didn't answer. She pressed the file against her chest and held it there. The rain shook the walls. The glass jars vibrated on their shelves. 20 years of dust sifted down from the drawer gaps like quiet snow. Sarah's eyes didn't leave the date on the cover. It was starting. Finally, cultural note. Clinic you just saw isn't simply a medical office. In Korean neighborhoods, a hanyak bang, a traditional herbal medicine clinic, is closer to a community living room than a treatment facility. People come not just to pick up prescriptions, but to sit, talk, and be heard. The practitioner holds a kind of trust that most Western clinics never earn. SARA'S white coat carries the full authority of a licensed medical degree, the Korean equivalent of an MD. The mortar she never put down. That's not a prop. It's the daily work of someone who inherited both a profession and sense of responsibility to the people it serves. As for Bong-soon, Sarah's adoptive mother, the bond between them runs deeper than most Western audiences might expect. In Korean culture, hyo-filial devotion extends fully to adoptive relationships. Caring for an aging, unwell parent isn't seen as a burden. It's one of the most fundamental ways of showing who you are. The rain had stopped. Morning came in grey and waterlogged, puddles all down, the alley catching a pale reflection of the sky. At the edge of the clinic's eaves, one last drop gathered, held, and fell. Tap. That was it. Night over. Sarah had been at the furnace since before dawn. Bong Soon's episodes always left the area around. It wrecked, ash, kicked out, tools displaced, the whole corner in disarray. Nobody knew why. It just happened that way. Sarah worked the ash, shovel in slow strokes, clearing the grate, and that's when the tip caught on something hard, solid, not ash. She dug around it and pulled it free. A metal box, waterproofed, roughly the size of two open palms pressed together. The surface was caked with old ash, pressed so deep it had almost become part of the metal. Sarah carried it to the car's courtyard and ran water over it from the outdoor tap until the grey crust started giving way. There was a lock. She needed a key. She carried the box inside. The key lived around Bong Soon's neck, a small thing on a thin silver chain. The kind of key that looked like it belonged to a diary or a jewellery box, not anything that mattered. Bong Soon had never taken it off. Not for baths, not for sleep, not once in all the years Sarah had been watching. While her mother slept, Sarah unclasped the chain. She told herself she was borrowing it. The box opened. Inside 3 USB drives, a stack of photographs still in their film sleeves, and a handwritten statement, several pages, dense and careful. At the bottom of the last page, a signature. Sarah knew that. Handwriting. She'd seen it hundreds of times on prescription slips, in letters, and finally on a notepad, propped against a funeral portrait. That afternoon, notices arrived. 3 of Sarah's herbal suppliers had terminated their contracts simultaneously. Each letter gave a different reason. One cited logistics. One cited internal policy changes. The third didn't bother with a reason at all, just a single line and a signature. Sarah read each one, folded them, and put them in the drawer. The drawer already had company. Yesterday's notice, the one from the day before. Taeseok was moving faster than Shed expected. Sarah opened the clinic an hour early. She dragged 2 plastic chairs out to the mouth of the alley and taped up a hand-lettered sign. Redevelopment, compensation free, legal consultation every morning, 9 a.m. The first day, nobody came. Second day, one grandmother showed up, suspicious and slow-moving. Third day, 5 people. By the 4th morning, Shed run out of chairs and was pulling in a crate from the back to use as a makeshift seat. Nobody complained about the crate. People had trouble looking at her directly at first. Their eyes would find her shoulder or the wall behind her or the tea shed set in front of them. Anywhere but her face. Sarah had lived with that her whole life. She knew the move. So Shed come out with sangwa tang, a warming, Korean medicinal tea, slow brewed, the real thing, and set a cup in front of each person before saying a word. It was hot. It was good. Something shifted after the first sip. By the second visit, Most of them were actually looking at her, not past her, not at the wall, at her face, her hands on the paperwork, the way she explained things, like shed never once considered, talking down to anyone. She broke down the legal language into plain terms. She made charts showing exactly what compensation residents were entitled to and when. She walked them through the paperwork step by step in the right order with deadlines circled. People took notes. The alley outside SARA Oriental Medicine quietly became a different kind of place. That evening, footsteps stopped outside the clinic's back door. Sarah didn't open it. She waited. "Would you open the door, please?" A man's voice. Low, no frills, completely dry. Not threatening, not quite asking either. Just a statement that a door existed and head like it opened. Sarah opened it. He was tall, black jacket, a security company logo on the left chest. There was an old scar on his face below. His left jaw, the kind that had been deep once and healed crooked. He looked at her and gave a single short nod. "Kang Jun-ho, I run the security contractor working for Oh Tae-seok." Sarah started to close the door. "I need to talk to you about my father, what he did to yours." Her hands stopped. Jun-ho stood while he talked. Sarah stood too. Neither of them moved toward the chairs inside. Out in the back courtyard, bundles of drying herbs hung from the laundry line, swaying in a slow evening wind. Junho's father had been part of it. The clinical trial fraud 20 years ago. Head moved documents, pressured witnesses, done the specific, quiet work of cutting Sarah's adoptive father off from anyone who might have helped him. Junho had found out after his father died. The confession was in the will, last page, last paragraph, at the very bottom, an address. This address. "It took me 3 years to come here." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. The herbs on the line moved again. She watched them. Junho watched her. "Why are you telling me this? I'm going to stay until it's finished." "You work for Tae-seok." "Not anymore." Short answer. Sarah looked at the scar. Under his jaw, old damage, the kind a blade leaves. She didn't say anything. She didn't close the door either. She just turned and walked back inside, leaving the door open behind her. Junho stayed where he was. He was still there when the night got cold. Still there in the morning. Cultural note 2. Things in this chapter are worth sitting with. The first is Sangwa Tang, the tea Sarah brought out before saying a single word. This isn't casual hospitality. In Korean traditional medicine, Sangwa Tang is a full body restorative brewed from a specific blend of roots and herbs to rebuild depleted energy, physical and emotional. Offering it to strangers before asking anything of them is a quiet act of care that says more than words ever could. The second is the redevelopment sign, Sarah, hung in the alley. In Korea, urban redevelopment isn't the slow economic drift that gentrification tends to be in Western cities. It hits harder. For working class and elderly residents, a redevelopment notice often means the complete erasure of a community that took decades to build. The fact that Sarah the outsider, the one they wrote foreigner on a form, is the person standing up to fight for that community, is the quiet heart of everything this story is doing. The lawsuit landed on a Wednesday morning. Unlicensed medical practice. Sarah read it once, then again, then folded it and put it in the drawer with everything else. The drawer was almost full now, a whole paper archive of Taeseok's moves stacked in chronological order like a case file she hadn't asked to build. Taeseok was fast. She'd give him that. Fast wasn't the same as right, though. It never was. SARA'S license was legitimate. Issued by the Korean Ministry of Health and Welfare, framed, hung on the wall, where any patient could read it without squinting. 3 days before the lawsuit arrived, she had taken the frame down and cleaned the glass. No smudges, no dust, nothing. Shed put it back, perfectly level. Shed known something was coming. Junho showed up that morning. He already knew about the lawsuit. I can get you a lawyer. I'm fine. Sarah was slicing dried herbs, her knife moving in an easy rhythm. Revoking my license requires sign-off from the Minister of Health. That's not something a district office manager can pull off. She set down the knife and looked at him. He's bluffing. Junho watched her for a moment, didn't say anything. The crew showed up that afternoon. 5 guys in work gear, one of them carrying demolition equipment, all of them holding a municipal order for the removal of an illegal structure. The structure in question was the clinic's sign, apparently. It protruded too far over the sidewalk. Sarah untied her apron, put on her white coat, walked to the front door and stood in it. 5 men, 1 doorway. Sarah looked them over the way she always looked at. People left to right, unhurried, like she was, reading something written just below the surface of their skin. The guy on the far left, she kept her voice conversational. You've got old ACL damage in your right knee. Don't run, you'll regret it. The man went still. The one in the middle, you're hypertensive. I can see it in your face. Getting worked up right now is genuinely not a good idea for you. The middle guy took a half step back without meaning to. And the one on the far right, she paused just long enough. L3, L4 disc herniation. Carrying that equipment around is going to land you in surgery if you're not careful. Nobody moved. The guy with the demolition equipment let his arm drop slowly, like he wasn't entirely sure he was doing it. The crew foreman stepped forward. Thick neck, narrow eyes, the look of someone who'd handled pushback before and found it entertaining. That a threat? That's a diagnosis. Sarah didn't blink. The threats started. On your end, if we're keeping track. He stepped closer. Sarah didn't move. Not an inch. Her eyes stayed level, with his not looking up, not looking away, and something in his expression flickered just slightly before he could stop it. Then the sound came from the alley entrance. The grandmothers from the consultation sessions, the regulars who came in for their prescriptions. A loose gathering of neighbours standing at the mouth of the alley, not saying a word, just standing there, watching. It was enough. The crew left, took their demolition equipment with them, unused. The sign above the clinic caught the afternoon sun and held it, Sarah. Oriental medicine, 4 characters, plain as ever. Junho had watched the whole thing from the far end of the alley. He opened his hand, then closed it. Sarah knew he'd been there. She didn't acknowledge it. She didn't have to. That night, Sarah opened the USB drives. Everything her adoptive father had saved. The original clinical trial data before and after. Comparisons showing exactly where the numbers had been altered and the victim list. 17 names, 3 of them marked deceased. Sarah closed the files, opened them again, read the victim list from top to bottom out loud, 1 name at a time, 17 times. The next morning, 3 local news outlets received anonymous tips simultaneously. Internal documents from a 20-year-old clinical trial. Not the full picture, just a corner of it, one edge of the puzzle where you could start to make out the shape of what it had been. That was enough. Reporters started making calls. Tae-seok's phone began ringing before 9. Sarah had no way of knowing that. She knew it anyway. Junho came by that evening. Back door again. This time, Sarah opened it before he had to ask. They sat on the wooden floor of the back porch. Sarah brought tea. Junho held his cup without drinking. Just kept it in both hands, letting the heat work through his palms. It's getting dangerous. I know. And you're going to keep going. It wasn't really a question. Sarah looked at him. He looked at her. The only sound was the slow simmer of something. On the stove, inside low, even, steady. When they called me a foreigner in this land, Sarah said, I decided to become the permanent executor of their families. Reckoning. The diagnosis is done. The only prescription left is ruin. Junho set his cup down. The sound it made was small, but it carried across the whole porch. You see it by now, don't you? Sarah doesn't fight with her fists. She never has. Her weapons are observation, diagnosis, and timing, knowing exactly when to move and when to wait. That helplessness we feel at work, on the street, up against systems that were never built with us in mind. Sarah moves through it differently, not with force, with knowledge. That's what makes this story feel both chilling and deeply satisfying. The fog had settled in thick before dawn. Sarah's phone went off, unknown number, 3 rings, silence. Then it rang again. She picked up, just breathing at first. Then Bong Soon's voice. 1 word. Sarah. The line went dead. Sarah put on her white coat. Nothing else, no bag, no keys, just her phone in her hand. She walked out into the alley. The fog had swallowed the streetlights whole, turning each one into a soft, useless smear of yellow. She didn't run, she walked. Fast and deliberate, the way you move when panic is something you've decided not to afford. She texted Junho. 1 address. That was all he'd need. The abandoned warehouse sat at the edge of a cliff. An old quarry site, long gutted and left to rust. Tae-seok had picked it because sound didn't carry there. The fog helped with that too. muffling everything, cutting visibility down to 30 feet in every direction. Sarah knew all of this when she walked through the door. Tae-seok was inside. Bong-soon was beside him, sitting in a chair, like she'd been placed there carefully, which she had. Bong-soon's eyes moved when Sarah entered. They found her face and stayed there. Today was a clear day for her. She knew exactly where she was. You came alone. Tae-seok's voice had dropped an octave. The voice of a man who thought he'd already won. Did you bring the drive? Sarah reached into her coat pocket and produced a USB. Tae-seok's eyes locked onto it. Immediately, she turned it slowly between her fingers, unhurried. My mother first. Tae-seok chinned a signal to one of his guys. The man helped Bong-soon to her feet and walked her towards Sarah. Bong-soon's hand found Sarah's and held on. It was ice cold. Right now, your voice is being broadcast nationwide, Sarah said it quietly. Matter of fact, like she was reading a weather report. Tae-seok's face went completely still. Inside the left breast pocket of Sarah's white coat, her phone was live streaming. The notification had already gone out. Residents from the consultation session, journalists who'd been following the anonymous tips, and one investigator who'd received an encrypted file 3 days ago were all watching in real time. Tae-seok snatched the USB out of her hand. He plugged it in. Blank drive. Something left his eyes when he realized whatever had been holding him together. The composure, the calculation, the long habit of being the most powerful person. In any room, it just went. What replaced it was uglier and faster. He had the knife out of his jacket in 2 seconds. His arm was moving towards Sarah in one. Junho was already between them. The sound it made was dull and short. Junho stood in front of Sarah with his left hand pressed to his side. Dark red worked its way between his fingers. The stain spread across the sleeve of Sarah's white coat. Small at first, then wider. Junho's knees started to go. Sarah caught him before he reached the floor. Both hands, solid grit, taking his weight. Without flinching, his face came to rest against her shoulder. Id already made my peace with it. His voice was steady, which somehow made it worse. Even if tonight was the last night. Sarah didn't answer. She got her hand against his side and pressed hard, then tore a strip from the hem of her coat and used it to apply pressure. Her hands didn't shake. Her heart was doing something she'd deal with later. The police didn't arrive fast. The fog slowed everything down. But they came. That was the thing about having a live audience of several hundred people. Someone always calls it in. Tae-seok backed up until the warehouse wall stopped him. His guys put their hands up first, one by one, reading the room Tae-seok held onto the knife until an officer physically took it from him. The handcuffs clicked. Small sound. Sarah heard it clearly. Bong-soon sat down next to Sarah beside Junho. She took his hand, a stranger's hand, someone she'd never met, and held it like she'd known him for years. Bong-soon was like that sometimes. She could be lost to everything and still find the thing that needed holding. The paramedics came through the door. Sarah stood up, still in her white coat, stain and all. She didn't take it off. As T-Sock was loaded into the police vehicle, the comments section of the live stream was moving faster than anyone could read. Sarah wasn't watching. She watched the gurney carry Junho out through the warehouse door instead. A paramedic asked her if she was okay. She nodded. She was not okay. She nodded. The fog was thinning at the edges now. Down below the cliff, the first grey light of morning was spreading across the valley. Somewhere in the distance, an ambulance. Siren started up and then faded, heading somewhere else entirely. The surgical waiting corridor was white. Walls, floor, ceiling, all of it the same flat. Institutional, white, but doesn't comfort anyone, but is probably easier to clean. Sarah stood in it, wearing her white coat, the stain at her sleeve, gone brown at the edges. She hadn't taken it off. She wasn't sure she did. Could explain why. She just hadn't. At the far end of the corridor, Bong-soon was, dozing in a chair, with no back support, her head dropping forward every few minutes, and then jerking back up, forward and back, forward and back. Sarah watched her for a moment, then walked over and sat down beside her, offered her shoulder. Bong-soon leaned in without waking and was deeply asleep again in seconds. The surgery took 4 hours. Sarah didn't sit. She walked the corridor, 10 steps one way, 10 steps back, 10 steps one way, 10 steps back. She lost count of how many times. She wasn't keeping count. At 5 in the morning, the OR doors opened. The surgeon came out, still in his gown, found Sarah's face in the corridor and gave one short nod. He made it. Sarah put her hand flat against the wall, just for a second. Then she took it back. Junho opened his eyes 2 days later. Morning light was coming through the window at a low angle, the kind that makes everything look like it's been there for 100 years. Sarah was in the chair beside the bed, reading his chart. Shed changed into a clean coat. Her afro caught the light in a way that made the whole room feel warmer, and Junho looked at her for a moment before she noticed he was awake. She looked up from the chart. "Can I check your pulse?" He held out his wrist without a word. She placed 3 fingers along the inside and was quiet for a moment, reading what was there. Normal. Junho smiled. Small, careful his side wouldn't let him do anything bigger than that yet. But it was there. Tae-seok's detention was confirmed within 3 days. Clinical trial, data falsification, obstruction of justice, witness intimidation. The charges kept coming, each one pulling the next, behind it like a thread being unravelled from a sweater. The 20-year-old case resurfaced completely. Victim families held a press conference, and for the first time in 2 decades, SARA'S adoptive father's name appeared in print accurately, in full, with the right context. A doctor who was framed, a man who died carrying a truth he was never allowed to speak. Sarah read the article on her phone, sitting in Junho's hospital room. She didn't read it out loud, just her eyes moving through it once, then again. The collapse of Tae-seok's family empire moved fast. Once it started, the real estate holding company went first. The redevelopment permits were revoked. An internal audit opened at the district office. Names that had appeared alongside Tae Seok's on those documents 20 years ago were called in one by one, quietly by people with badges and clipboards. The redevelopment plan for the alley was cancelled entirely. SARA Oriental Medicine stayed exactly where it had always been. The day Jun-ho was discharged, Sarah opened the clinic early. The alley already had people in it, the grandmothers from the consultation session, the regulars, people whose faces she knew, but whose names she was still learning. Nobody had organised it. They'd just shown up the way people do when something feels like it deserves witnessing. Bong-soon was sitting on the wooden porch, watching all of them. Her eyes were clear today, fully clear the way they sometimes were, without warning or explanation. "Our Sarah's here," she announced, loud enough for the whole alley to hear. Jun-ho was standing at the entrance to the alley, discharge bag in hand, taking in the scene with the careful expression of someone who wasn't sure if he was allowed to be part of it. Sarah saw him. He saw her. She looked away first and went inside. He followed. She knew he would. She let him. The smell of something simmering on the stove drifted all the way out to the street. That afternoon, Sarah propped the clinic door all the way open for the first time. Shed always kept it at half habit or caution or something shed. Never stopped to name. Today she pushed it to the wall and left it there. A breeze came through. The herbal smell went out with it, spreading down the alley. Around the corner, 2 blocks further than seemed reasonable for a smell, someone followed it back to the source. Later that day, a first-time visitor, someone who'd never been before. Sarah greeted them with a smile. That used to be harder than it looked. It wasn't anymore. Sarah put down roots in this alley while people called her a foreigner. Roots aren't visible, that's the whole point of them. But when a tree doesn't move in the wind, you know they're there. This story is about justice, yes. But underneath that, it's about a person reclaiming the place that was always hers. Nobody gave it to her. Nobody could have taken it either. It just took 20 years and one very long night for everyone else to figure that out. One, Sarah didn't raise her fists. When the demolition crew showed up at her door, she read their bodies, knew their weak points before they'd taken a single step toward her. The most powerful thing you can bring into a confrontation is something the other person never saw coming. Your expertise, your knowledge, the years you spent learning what you know, that's not soft. That's a weapon. When someone tries to push you out, reach for the thing, you know best. Whether that's medicine or law or the quiet confidence of someone who has spent a lifetime being underestimated and learnt exactly how to use it. To Jun-ho walked 3 years to get to that back door. His father's sins weren't his. He knew that, but he also knew that knowing it wasn't enough. Responsibility is a choice, not an inheritance. Where you come from doesn't write the ending. What you do at a specific door on a specific night when it would be easier to walk away, that's what writes it. He didn't walk away. 3. Bong-soo never took off that key. 20 years, every bath, every sleepless night, every episode where she lost track of where and when she was.
The key stayed on. She was keeping something safe for someone she loved without ever being asked to explain it. If there is someone in your life holding something for you quietly without making it a point, without asking for credit, that's the realest kind of love there is, the kind that doesn't need an audience. This story is a work of fiction. If this story moved you, like, subscribe, and hit the bell. The next episode is already waiting for you.